The federal income tax system in the United States seems more vulnerable to significant change today than it has in decades, maybe even in over a century since it began. We've seen the news about potential tariffs change basically daily. We've seen talk of potentially shutting down the IRS. Recently, it was announced that the IRS will be laying off thousands of employees, and Trump has even teased potentially trying to eliminate the income tax overall. In light of these potential changes, I would like to highlight some of the tax systems that have existed throughout history and around the world, and we are going to rank them in order of best and most fair to worst and least fair. Each tax system will be assigned a ranking of A through F, except for the best tax system will get a ranking of S, which is for some reason the top tier category. Don't ask me why, I don't make the rules. We're gonna start off with the current tax system that we have in the United States, which is a progressive percentage income tax. A progressive percentage income tax is one in which the more income you earn, the higher of a percent of that income you pay on that money. In other words, if you earn minimum wage, you are very likely to not pay any taxes whatsoever on your income, so your effective income tax rate would be zero. Any money past about $11,000 that you make up to about $47,000, you'll pay about 12% on. Up to $100,000, you'll pay about 22% on, and the highest bracket as it currently stands right now is anything above $609,000, you'll pay 37% on. This means that the more income you earn, not only are you paying a higher dollar amount, because obviously you're paying a percentage of the money that you earn, but you're also paying a higher percent on each of those dollars. In this tax system, it is involuntary, which means if you do not pay those taxes, then you go to prison, and violent people with guns will take you there and force you to stay. What you get in return for these taxes that you pay is whatever the mob bosses decide you deserve. And for many people, that amounts to a big fat zero nothing. Meaning if you're more productive and earn more money, we take more from you, and you don't have any say in how much we take from you. You don't have any say in what you get in return for the money that we do take from you. And if you don't like the system, too bad, you can go rot in jail. This tax system gets a ranking of D. It is not the absolute worst, but it is pretty close to it. The next tax system that we're going to discuss is one that has been thrown around a lot in the media lately, and that is a sales tax or a consumption tax. Now, this kind of tax is still involuntary, but the tax is placed on a sale, meaning if you earn money and you don't spend any of it, you are not going to pay any taxes. It's crucial to understand here that all taxes incentivize certain behavior and disincentivize other behavior. And so when you tax income, you are disincentivizing earned income. That is why the highest paid people in the world do not have earned incomes. They get paid with other forms of compensation that have better tax treatment. It is also partly one of the reasons why the United States has such a problem with people not saving and not investing, because you are punishing the behavior of making more money and keeping that money, and instead you are incentivizing the behavior of consuming and just spending all that money. A sales tax would flip that on its head, and it would only punish the behavior of consumption. This would incentivize the behavior of earning more money, saving more money, which would give our nation a much stronger financial foundation. There wouldn't be so many households in such bad financial conditions that then have to rely upon the state for wealth transfers. When we're talking about fairness, it also gives you a level of control over how much you pay in taxes, because you get to choose how much money you spend outside of the very base necessities of just the cost of living. Anything beyond that, you get to choose how much money you're going to spend, and therefore you have some level of control over how much you pay in taxes. Therefore, it's more fair, it's more voluntary. Now, we have to talk about tariffs, because tariffs are a form of sales tax, because it is a tax on a certain type of consumption. It is just a very narrow type of sales tax, which becomes unfair, and it is able to be used in a very corrupt way. There are a lot of loopholes, easy ways to get around it, which is one of the reasons why tariffs were largely abandoned in favor of the income tax, because they were so abused. But if we're just talking about a sales tax overall on consumption of all goods, whether domestic or international, that is going to receive a score of B. Now, there's another idea that has been thrown around a lot, which is a flat tax. But what most people mean when they say flat tax is not a true flat tax. What they're talking about is a flat percentage income tax. So a flat percentage income tax would take a look at our current progressive percentage tax system and say there's only one tax bracket, whether it's 12%, 22%, somewhere in between. Everybody will pay the exact same percent on all their income. Now, while this type of system is just a little bit of a step in the right direction, it is still a progressive tax system. Really, nothing changes about this except the amount that you are going to pay. Because even if the percentage is the same for everybody, it is still true that you are going to pay a lot more in taxes if you earn more, because it's a percent of everything you earn. Everything about the current tax system still applies to a flat percentage tax. And so for that reason, this one is also going to go into the ranked category of D, along with a progressive percentage income tax. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, there's still a category beneath that, which is F. How in the world could you get worse than this? And that's basically just gonna be when that percent number reaches 100 and you have state ownership and control over the production of wealth, the production of goods and services. This is where you get into flat out socialism / communism, where the government or the people, the people being the state, the people with the guns, they control and outright own all means of production. This is essentially a 100% tax because the government then owns everything. And then they just decide how those resources are distributed. Inequality is the absolute worst in systems like this. It is the absolutely most extreme. Even though you don't have the same level of rich on top, you have really dirt poor on bottom. So the percentage difference between the top and the bottom still exists. And the people who are closest to the people in power are the ones who benefit. This is the worst type of system there is. It has killed hundreds of millions of people throughout history. And for that reason, it goes in the F category, and it is the worst system possible, and the farther we can get from that, the better. This next tax system you've probably never thought of before, but I'm sure you've experienced it. This is a bottom-up tax system. This is one where we take our current system and literally flip it upside down in terms of who taxes the most and who gets the decision-making on where that money is spent. In other words, cities tax the most and have the most decision power about how the money is spent, and then states, and then the federal government. This is what the founding fathers were shooting for when designing our country, so that it would be a bottom up, where states would have more power than the federal government and cities would be above states. The reason for this is because you have skin in the game. It is very easy to move from one city to another city, just a few miles away in many cases. If you do not like the way that your city is operating, if they're taxing you too much or spending it in a bad way, you can leave. Same thing with states. It is pretty easy, though not as easy as moving cities, it is pretty easy to move from one state to another. This creates a level of competition and keeps that power in check. It also means that the people who are making the decisions about how that money is spent have skin in the game because they're local. It's not somebody hundreds or thousands of miles away determining what life is going to be like for everybody, regardless of culture and regardless of interests. You get a wide mix, a wide variety of different systems and how the money is taxed and spent. And even though it's involuntary, you get the element of being able to opt in or opt out simply by moving. You've probably experienced systems like this before. Texas has a pretty similar system where it is taxed at the state level, but a lot of the spending decision happens at the local level, which does kind of invert it a little bit. Another system is Switzerland. They are very bottom up there. So much so that I saw an article a few years ago. Some lady was applying for a visa to move into Switzerland, and the people in the neighborhood that she was going to be moving into had the power to deny her the visa request because they thought she was annoying because she was a vegan. So they denied her request to be able to move in there. That is a bottom-up structure, and for tax reasons, that's going to land this one in the B category. It is pretty close to the top, though not quite there yet. The next system we're going to talk about is a flat dollar income tax. There are about 154 million US taxpayers as of 2022, and the United States government collected $4.8 trillion in 2022. If we do some quick math and divide 4.8 trillion by 158 million, we arrive at a number of about $31,000 per US taxpayer. Now, given the fact that everybody should be receiving the same amount of benefits from the US government, then you'd think it would stand to reason that everybody should be paying the same same dollar amount. But if we want to look at this with just a little bit of a devil's advocate argument here, the people who have the lowest amount of wealth, the lowest income, and the hardest times, those are the ones who need the help the most. In fact, that is the express purpose of many programs in the United States government, like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, just to name a few. In other words, the entire purpose of a lot of the tax system is to transfer money from those who have it and give it to those who have less. And if we were to look at a flat dollar tax amount, that would disproportionately impact the people who are worst off in society, and it would be a huge benefit to those who are already much better off. If my tax bill was only $30,000, it would be basically a 0% tax for me. But if you were to talk to me, let's say 10 years ago and say, hey, your tax bill this year is going to be $30,000, that would have bankrupted me. I wouldn't have even been able to pay it. And so unless we could get government spending down a ton to where that dollar amount would be feasible for almost every US American taxpayer, a flat dollar tax just doesn't seem that fair because it so disproportionately would impact the poor. And the richer you are, the better it would be for you. And so a flat dollar income tax goes in the category of C. The next tax system that we're going to talk about is a voluntary tax. And now you might think that is completely absurd because if taxes were voluntary, nobody would pay them. But as we saw in the bottom-up tax system, there are a couple of creative ways to make taxes voluntary, yet still attract a good amount of tax revenue. The number one way is to itemize the services, or many of the services that people are using or plan to use in the future, and allow people to opt in or opt out of just those systems. Something like Social Security is a great example because many young people would decide, hey, I don't want to participate in this because I would rather save for myself, invest for myself, and not rely on the government someday. So I'm going to opt out of this. I won't pay in and I'll never collect a check in my life. You could do the same thing with systems like Medicare, Medicaid. You could even do that with education. And if somebody decides to opt out of paying their education portion of the taxes, then they can never take advantage of any publicly funded educational facility. This would have the impact of creating some sort of competition in those services so that they would have to do at least as good, or in some cases better, than the free market alternative that those people would be paying for anyway. In other words, if a government program wanted to continue to receive its tax funding from a voluntary tax base, then the product that they're providing would have to be better than the alternative given the cost. Now, I understand you couldn't do this with everything like the military because right now everybody just kind of enjoys the fact that the United States has a strong military and there's no real way one person could just opt out from that but also not receive the benefits from that. And so the way you make a system like that voluntary is the ability to leave. In other words, if you don't want to participate in the involuntary parts of the tax code, you just have to leave and you cannot be a citizen there anymore, or at least you can't live there anymore. In the United States, we have the only country on earth outside of one dictatorship where if you leave, you still pay taxes to the United States. In every other country on earth, if you don't like the way the system works, you can just leave. You're not participating anymore. That means you're not receiving the benefits, so you don't have to pay for that tax system anymore. But in the United States, if you try and do that, you still pay taxes. And by the way, if you try and expatriate, you already have to be a citizen somewhere else, which if you didn't win the genetic lottery, you already have to be rich in order to purchase a citizenship somewhere else. And you also then have to pay an exit tax on the way out, which means there is no way to escape the tax system. Making the entire system completely voluntary though, and allowing you to opt out simply by leaving would again establish some sort of competitiveness with the overall tax system, and it would have to be designed to attract and keep wealth and talent rather than incentivizing it to leave. And for that reason, the voluntary tax system is going to go into the A category and is so far the most fair one that we've looked at because by participating in it, you are choosing it, and the level of competition it introduces would make the services much, much better. Now, the last tax system we're going to discuss here is the least likely, but we still have to talk about it because most people don't even think that it's a possibility, and this one is just simply no taxes. In other words, any service that you currently pay the government to provide would instead be provided by the free market if there was demand for it. We can see things like this very clearly would work, like you could get rid of the post office because we already have alternatives that are way better, like UPS and FedEx, and they're actually profitable and they don't just lose a ton of money every single year. You might think there's no possible way that the free market could provide services like judicial services, but that actually already exists today, and it's called arbitration, and many people use it. Many companies, many people, it's very popular, and it's a free market alternative to the government judicial service. Even things like security. On a small scale, we have private security. And by the way, because private security, they are citizens and they're not law enforcement officers, they're not above the law, and there's a lot less abuse, and quite simply, it's a lot more effective. That is why many people, once they have the means, pay for private security instead of relying on public security, because it's better. This can also be scaled up, and historically large-scale security has been deployed for things like protecting shipping routes. Many things that our US military has done and does today are not necessarily things that a government has to do by force. If you want a fantastic read about this, just to kind of explore some thought-provoking fictional society that would operate this way, I highly recommend this book. It's called The Ethics of Anarcho-Capitalism. It is a fiction book. It goes into a hypothetical little society that operates under just anarcho-capitalism, meaning no government, no laws, no force, just free market alternatives that would form a functioning society. But abolishing all taxes overall obviously is going to make it into our very top category. It's going to be ranked S. So there you have it. That is every single tax system ranked. I'm waiting patiently and hopefully that as we see changes announced to our tax system over the coming weeks and months, that we will be moving up this list instead of down. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.